Welcome to another empowering episode of MissPoppins, The Art of Parenting. I'm your host, Nikki Rishi, the founder of MissPoppins, a revolutionary parent tech app, and 180 Elevate, a social networking platform for conscious leaders. Today, we're joined by our special guest, Alyssa Smythe. We often place social media mom influencers on pedestals, admiring and idealizing them without realizing they are just like us, humans with their own struggles. Welcome, Alyssa, to the show today. So nice to have you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Let's dive right in. Let's talk about expectations after birth. What was that like for you, and what were you expecting before you gave birth to your baby girl?
Yeah, so as a mom going through the postpartum period for the very first time, I felt like what I was experiencing wasn't in alignment with what I was told that I was going to experience. In conversations and what I had seen online, I felt like oftentimes the postpartum period was romanticized, and that became the foundation for what I built my expectations on. And that's not to say that you don't experience beautiful moments in the postpartum period, but for a lot of moms, we experience difficulty, challenges, frustrations. I was expecting my delivery to go the way that I had envisioned it for the past 9 months. I was expecting that my breastfeeding journey would come very easily and naturally. I wasn't anticipating any sort of complication with that. And I was expecting that the transition into motherhood itself would have been a little more graceful. Not as rocky as it was. So those were the big, I feel like 3 pillar expectations that I had. And I just don't feel like a single one of them was met.
What happened with the complications that might have led to potentially a C-section? What was going through your head? Tell us more about the birthing experience and why were these expectations not have been met? And then in hindsight, which is always 2020, what could have been done differently in terms of preparation, perhaps?
Yeah, so I always said I did not want a C-section. A C-section was my worst nightmare. And I read all of the books. I went to birthing classes, and honestly, I just kind of tuned out the part about the C-section because in my mind, like I wasn't gonna have one of those. Like that wasn't for me. And when the time came, when I was in labor, I had been pushing for hours and there was no progression. My body was giving out. And, my doctor came into the room and said, it's time to consider this possibility. And in my head, I was thinking, like, this is not the way that it's supposed to go. Like, this is not what I wanted at all. And I'm terrified because I didn't mentally prepare for that potential outcome. So it was just it happened so fast. It was all just kind of a blur. I felt like I didn't really have enough time to process or even grieve the fact that I wasn't going to get the birth that I envisioned.
And it's very common to have, so it's so important for moms to have the right expectations. And that's why, we have something like MissPoppins in terms of coaching. And you also talked about transition, right? We actually have something called a grief coach, and it's so beautiful. What she does is she doesn't just do a loss grief coaching. She actually coaches through transitions, and she says who you are as an individual and a solo person, always taking care of yourself, to then who you become as a mom in the new parenting journey is a transition. It's actually, you said it's not all glamorous, right? It's actually the depth of who you were and the rebirth of someone new. So I didn't even know this as a mom of twins, what I went through, and the founder of MissPoppins, and she's telling me all these new things. So just imagine new moms, young moms like yourselves, what, the expectation would have been versus if not the appropriate coaching. And that's what we're trying to really, through your experience and through the lens of so many coaches, right, trying to prep moms. Also, research suggests that when the child is born, 10 to 20% new moms have ambivalent or negative feelings. And I'm pretty sure that statistics is higher than 20%. They have ambivalent feelings towards the newborns in the early postpartum period, right? The love at first sight is not so common. How did you feel in that moment?
Yeah, so, you always hear about this instant bond or instant connection that mothers feel when they get to first hold their baby. And that was 100% not my experience. The first time I got to hold my daughter, I was still on the operating table, in and out of consciousness. Like, I was not even fully present. I was nauseous. I barely remember it. And even the second time, whenever I was more present, more coherent and grounded, it still didn't feel like the bond or connection that you hear most people talk about. And it wasn't because I didn't love her. I knew that I instinctually did. It was just that I had so many different aspects physically and mentally working against me. I was in so much pain. I was still, again, very nauseous, could barely move. My body felt like it was in survival mode. And mentally, again, it's the not having time to process or knowing how to really cope with what just happened. And so with all of those physical and mental aspects, I feel like working against me, it didn't really give me the capacity to fully bond with her in the way that I wanted to initially.
And of course, it changes. The feelings of love and attachment deepen. Gosh, as you get to know the baby and navigate the challenges of parenthood, how old was your baby when you first experienced it? And then let's also talk a little bit about the breastfeeding journey and the struggle there.
Yeah, so I would probably say my daughter was around a month old when I mean, day one, home from the hospital, I mean, day by day, you get to know her, you get to understand her better. But I would say it was at that month mark where I felt like my confidence as a parent was all there. And it was when all of my additional support had left. My mom had gone back home, my mother-in-law had gone back home, my husband went back to work, and it was just her and I for the first time. And I think that getting to experience just her and I for the very first time definitely helped deepen that love, care, and just respect for her, because now it was just her and I. There was no one else around. And I just remember looking at her saying, like, I've got you. Like, I've got you. We're going to be okay. It's just you and me. And I think from that point on, good luck has just, I mean, oh my gosh, like, she's almost 2 now. And my love for her is just overflowing, and I could just burst out into tears just talking about how much I love her.
I'm so glad, the postpartum period, those 4 months, which we call the fourth trimester, it's a mixed feeling. And then when the clouds disappear and the sun appears, it's a beautiful transition in of itself as well.
Yeah.
How was the breastfeeding journey and the experience for you overall?
Um,
That's another challenge.
it is. When my daughter was first born, she had very high levels of bilirubin. And we were told that she needed to consume a certain amount of fluids for those levels to go down. Well, because of my C-section, my milk had not come in. And so as a mother, my number one concern was her safety and her health. And so from day one, she was introduced to the bottle. Now, we still tried in the hospital to get her to latch and work on the progression to breastfeeding. But even whenever we were discharged and came home, we still struggled with those high levels. And our pediatrician said, if we don't see those levels come down, she's going to go back to the hospital. And so at that time, my body was not producing what she needed to stay healthy. And so again, we were still trying, but at the end of the day, because I was still having to supplement with formula and also feed her through the bottle, she just obviously naturally gravitated toward the bottle. She never really wanted to work on the breast, and my supply couldn't sustain at the time like what she needed. So that in and of itself was hard to come to terms with. I know a lot of moms sometimes feel like their bodies failed them, or for some reason they feel like they're failures, but they're not. I feel like that's out of anyone's control. So breastfeeding was not, it wasn't the journey that I thought I would have. And that was another part of the postpartum period that I feel like I just had to come to terms with and just take the time to grieve, because at the end of the day, her health, her safety was most important, and however she gets those nutrients is how she's going to get them, whether it's through feed, formula, or whatever else.
And of course, you're going through your own emotional challenges and navigating that upturn and downturn of mom guilt, right? Having to take care of the baby, figuring out what you want to do next in terms of feeding, because breast is best is so encouraged and motivated all through the literature of becoming a new mom. Did your support system help you navigate through these tough times? I think it's so important to have a village. That's what we're trying to create through MissPoppins ourselves. And who was your village? Who was your support system? And how did that help you through all the different phases of motherhood?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, my husband was the rock in all of this. I mean, he, from helping me physically with just getting up and going to the restroom, or helping me take a shower, reminding me when to take my medication, always reminding me when it was time to feed. I mean, he really was just kind of my brain in that moment. And
Yeah.
he was definitely the kind of support that, I wasn't alone in the midnight feedings. I wasn't alone at 3 a.m. He was there with me every step of the way. But I also had other help, like my mom. My mom came down for the first 3 weeks and just made sure that as Scott was taking care of me, she was taking care of us, making sure that our house stayed clean, that we all were fed, giving me rest when I felt like I needed it. My mother-in-law was so helpful, and even friends who couldn't physically be with me, mothers that had gone through what I was going through before, checking in on me, making sure I was okay, letting me know it was okay if I wasn't okay. So overall, I feel like I had the best support system that you could possibly have. And I feel like that's a true testament to say, like, even with me having the best support system you could possibly have, I still struggled. I still found it hard. And so,
Right.
to know that other moms don't have that same support system, it honestly just it wrecks me, because I feel like I barely made it even with all of that support.
And there are moms out there as parents of multiples. I was just thinking, right there, anytime you think about a particular experience, it's always relative, right? But at the end of the day, all our experiences are relative. It isn't that one is struggling or having a bigger challenge than the other. And it's how we navigate, right? How do we solve for the journey? That's the most important. So it brings me to our last point about the different journeys and the different phases of parenthood. It's postpartum, it's newborn phase, it's breastfeeding challenge, and there's sleep coaching, behavior, so many different development milestones that kids go through, and development milestones that you go through as a new mom. What would you have told yourself in the top 3 phases of transition during?
Yeah, so definitely during the postpartum period, if I could go back and revisit myself, I would say that what you're about to walk through, it's not a walk in the park. It is going to be difficult, but you will come out on the other side. I feel like for so many first-time moms, when you're walking through that postpartum period for the first time, you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel, but there is, and you will get there. And I love what you said, and remind me what you said. You kind of died. What did you say? You said you will die to your old self, but you rebirth to what?
Yes, it's a transition, right? So it's the death to your old self and a rebirth into a new self. It's not rebirth into anything, just your rebirth as a new individual. And it's grief, it's transition, it's change. And so we actually have a grief counselor for that phase as well, believe it or not, because it's an important transition that everyone otherwise thinks it's glamorous, but it's so real and so raw.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad, that you have shared your experience with us today, because it's so important for everyone to realize what changes parents go through, and not to shortchange what dads go through. They are also, I'm sure, entering a whole new phase of life. where they feel very similar to us, minus all the physical and emotional challenges.
Yeah.
But, Alyssa, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for these personal experiences that will shed light and give hope to moms entering motherhood.
Thank you.
We forget how common and relatable the challenges of motherhood truly are. That's why our mission is to shed light today on the realities of motherhood. Welcome, Alyssa, and thank you for opening up and sharing your experiences with the struggle of setting expectations and being hit with the reality of it all. As a new mom, we tend to daydream about how beautiful childbirth is and all the great times. And the first milestone and the last milestone, we start to draw the picture of what an ideal family should be and what an ideal journey should be, and all the different phases we go through. We dive into some of those times and highlight and give opportunities to moms who were and are in your shoes, Alyssa, the chance to see it from your own lens. The main reason we're doing this is to give you an insider eye to the list of influencers and the life of them and how they can experience it all through the happy, the sad, frustrating challenges, but it will all pass and you will come out of it stronger with every struggle. This podcast is brought to you by MissPoppins. To the moms out there that will keep sharing experiences of motherhood to show that you're not alone, this too shall pass. And most importantly, we're here for you. With MissPoppins, the support and help is available on demand with our app on any app store with a free 30-minute session with any of our coaches. Until next time, I'm your host, Nikki, signing off. Thank you.